Yeah, so following on we were, I mean, obviously you're very welcome if you've just come tonight to join us for a general conversation, which is lovely. Some of you, of course, may not need a course, you're already established, but you might, of course, know somebody who might be interested, and we'd be very pleased if you would like to pass that on. Some of you have enrolled already, so we know you are interested, and some of you may not be sure, and that is what tonight is about. I mean, we will come to discuss this course a little bit more in detail, but the idea is it'll be a general overview of the fashion journey. So it shouldn't matter whether you've never done any fashion before. It should still be helpful if you're already studying on a 3 or 4 year BA course or a 1 or 2 year MA course, because it'll be, shall we say, the froth about fashion. So the basic things that you're bound to learn and know at college, swinging darts, writing essays, that won't really be taken into account. I think it can be, if one's not careful, one loses the passion and the excitement about what the subject is that you're studying and aiming for. So this will ideally be the excitement. I hope I'm not promising something I can't deliver. And it should be very interesting, even if you've had some experience already. Another positive for those of you that are studying at college is there's no submission and no marking, but in time there will be a practical course for a far smaller group, and that is something we will explain to those of you that want to join us on the theoretical 5-week course, which starts next Thursday. It'll always be Thursday 6 till 8 o'clock, but obviously we can tell you more about the topics and what you'll be doing. But I have been doing this quite a long time, so I suppose, I hope I've sort of got to understand what are the important dreams. So if you were an actor, you sort of want to know about the best things that can happen to you, rather than maybe your career changing slightly or not necessarily fulfilling the opportunity to do what you want. This journey will be about hopefully realizing the dream and encouraging you towards your dream, which I think can so often be forgotten, especially in this time when everybody's in isolation. So there isn't that atmosphere of everyone buzzing off each other, which we're all used to from studios and group working and that sort of thing. So we'll come back to that, but obviously thank you for joining us. And am I going to start telling a little bit about myself?
Yes, I think that's, why don't we start with you telling about how you got into fashion, how you got
Okay, great. I mean, apologies to those of you that do know, and I recently mentioned this in a podcast, although the podcast was really about another subject, but I was an 80s student. So of course everybody tells me all the time that was a wonderful time. Perhaps it actually was, but I don't really, perhaps it didn't feel like it at the time. And I did a foundation course at Kingston University, which was near my parental home. For whatever reason, I don't know. I mean, it's like we all pick choices, don't we? I went to Ravenspurn College of Art and Design, as it was then known, for my degree course. I think it was one of those things where we knew of other colleges, but when we went to look round, it looked great, and a few of us just decided to go there. It was as simple as that. And then after that, I did do the 2-year course at the Royal College of Art. And I'm sure it happens now, but there weren't very many of us then. I mean, an MA was really considered a little bit more rare. I'm not saying that's a good thing, but there were fewer of us. And of course, you all know that everyone's now championing to get the highest possible qualification. And if there are lots of people doing an MA, then do I do a PhD? Do I do an MPhil? And so it goes on. But we did get to meet lots of people. And 2 of us were chosen to go to Switzerland by the Swiss fabric companies who joined together. And at that show, I did meet Claude Montana, who I'm sure many of you are aware of, but he might not be on the lips of some of the more younger members of you. But at that time, that was quite an iconic designer. obviously now his business is shuttered, and the sad thing that happens to cult designers. So I don't know who his equivalent would be today, but he did like my work. It did happen after college that there was a job. I probably wasn't quite ready for what there was to learn. And although I did pick it up, I didn't really understand the craftsmanship that existed then. It was a time when garments had a lot of stitching on them. So if you compare it to the amount of stitching that's on a standard pair of jeans that we all see every day, but perhaps don't always understand how much work goes into a jean. So everything was stitched beyond, and there were interesting things put inside to help the sculptural shapes, even organza. So they were really actually masterpieces of craft, and they were considered very unique at the time. And it was a time of shoulder pads, which I know people now frown and giggle about, but some of the shoulders even had wood in them, you know, and it was done beautifully. Wood makes it sound like something out of a garden shed, but they were actually done because it was something that could support the weight. So I did learn an awful lot technically, but I don't think I was really ready for that job, and it could have gone on and on and on, but I decided to come back to London, and there were so many things I wanted to do. And through another competition at college, I'd come across Mansfield, which was a much more commercial company, but then the quality was still immense. You didn't have all the Primarks, so even a high street company was often of very high standards. And it was quite a different approach. He knew every trick to make something sell, whether it was something interesting on the sleeve. So if you were browsing through a shop, you were drawn like a magnet to the sleeve. And the workmanship was very good. So I didn't find a great difference between there and Paris. It just, there wasn't the excitement, and everything was about selling. And I didn't want to do it every day. And he said I didn't have to do it every day. So I don't know what that says about myself, but I suppose since then I've generally been a bit of a free spirit and done other things. I did do some work for Harvey Nichol's own label. So the label was HN, but I designed the garments that they used and sold. And I did actually do some clothes under my own label, but you know, I know it's probably most designers' dreams, and those of you I'm talking to tonight, I know some of you are here, that is your aspiration, and I'm very excited by that, and I love it when young designers do their own thing. But I didn't really have anything that I felt I had to say other than that. But in those days, London Fashion Week was huge, and there was a very large area run by a show producer, which was really for anybody that had perhaps just knocked up a few garments to perhaps having a very small company, and they were often sponsored. And then there was a group in the middle, which I belonged to, called Design Studio. And at Design Studio, I suppose we were a middle area. We were expensive, but not premium expensive. We were less well known. And then there was the main group, the London Collections, which at the time were all the Jacques Azagari, Gina Frattini, Bill Gibb, Wendy Dagworthy, and those sorts of designers. So I had tried that, but I was generally jumping from company to company and working. I mean, there seemed to be plenty of work, but I was working on lots of different things at the same time. And this is where the story changes slightly. I was working with someone called Jeanette, who actually, in a way, we were arch enemies at college. I don't know why, but we suddenly found out we sort of got on very well without all the sort of poison and competitiveness of college. And she said, oh, there's this huge job for a commercial company. You'll have to forgive me, I can't even remember who it was now. And she said, would I do it with her? So we started working on this together, and she used to never be free on 2 days a week because she was going to Southend to teach. And I said, oh God, I'd love to do that. It was just, I don't know why, I just suddenly thought I really envied her. You know, she sort of said, oh, it's very enjoyable. And I just thought, God, I'd really, really like to do that. It just suddenly stirred something in my emotions. And I'd met, if I have a student, I have to be honest, so many things have come to me through students. I mean, I hope I've helped them in return, but I think she was on work placement and she was from Southampton. I think it was College of Art then rather than university as it is now. She told me that the boss was Anna Hillman. And so I sent this letter, and I'm a little bit embarrassed now because I didn't put too much effort into this letter. It was just like, oh, I'm around, I'm free, I'm marvelous, and threw my CV in. And she replied quite quickly and said, come down and, let's have a chat. And she offered me some, and I went down thinking, well, I'm going to be horrible and I'm going to do this. And, I had all these plans in my mind because I really wasn't a teacher or a lecturer. I hadn't actually had any specific training, but I just took to it, like the expression duck to water. And of course, as you all know, one thing leads to another. And at the time they were linked with Winchester. Now they have a huge link with Winchester School of Art, which of course is a neighbouring city. So I got some lecturing there. And then I met someone who, I think she came as an external examiner from Hastings, and she said, would I go there? And then I went to Gloucester, and I really was almost doing a little roadshow. Sometimes, depending on my freelance schedule, I would go to a different college 5 days a week. I mean, it was a little bit grueling doing the journey, but from my point of view, now I look back, I was very, very lucky because that was training for me. I mean, now I smile when people say to me, well, have you done a teacher training course? And I think, well, how will sitting in a room with someone telling me about teaching really make me good at that job? So I haven't done any of those courses. I believe they're considered very important if you apply for a job in teaching, but I guess I came across the experience, and I was working with very talented students and some not so talented. But of course, when some need more help, it's much more of a pressure to become a good lecturer. And sometimes we would sit with a group and we would put fabrics together and discuss why they went together, whereas I think it can happen with talented students at grander colleges that the staff just presume they can all do it themselves, and good luck, as it were. And then I did have the opportunity, I think I'd been for an interview at Harrow School of Art as it was known then, and I didn't get the job, sadly. And I was on my way home, and I think I got off at Oxford Circus, as you do. I mean, there was no virus then. And I bumped into someone from Central St. Martin's, and I wasn't trying to be dishonest, but I just said, oh, well, I've just been for an interview at Harrow. And she obviously thought they were going to take me and said, oh, I need you at CSM. Don't go there, don't go there. So to cut a long story, I did go to Central St. Martin's to teach, and the irony was when I bumped into the course leader from Harrow. Harrow is now the University of Westminster, or Westminster Fashion. And of course, when she knew I was at Central St. Martin's, she wanted me. So I'm sure some of you are smiling, thinking, well, that's been very similar to your own journey, isn't it? It's the person everybody fancies, or the jacket everyone says is great, so you feel you must have it. So I did feel very proud to have those opportunities, if I'm honest, particularly to go to Central St. Martin's, because then it still exists, but now it's Foyle's bookshop. And it was an incredible building with incredible history. And of course, it was an art school, so it still is. So it had quite a different feel to some of those other more sort of regimented technical courses. And of course, I had to brush up my game, and I had students who were smart and cheeky and clever, and it was survival of the fittest. And I didn't think I was doing anything particularly marvelous, but I then learned that apparently the students didn't used to generally come in, and I was extremely honoured and lucky that I had a full class. So somehow that sort of led to other things. And missing out a little bit of history, which isn't terribly relevant. I did get the chance to start running the course at Westminster Fashion. So really, I was given the job, which you might think is perhaps not necessarily fair anymore. I'd worked there and they knew me, but I didn't actually apply for the job. So, you know, looking at my own history, I suppose I haven't gone through some of those formal processes. And I guess I'm trying to encourage you to think that, you know, you've got to knock on doors and make opportunities, because sometimes it's connecting people, not just filling in forms, connecting with people, not just filling in forms all day.
But it's you know, I have, sorry, I interrupt you, but I just remember this funny story. When I was a student, I had a classmate, and she wanted to do work placement at Purple magazine, and she basically just went in there while she was in Paris, asked for a job, got a job, left college, and now she's like one of the editors or something like that.
Well, and I want people to still think those things can happen, because you see, sometimes I remember Alexandra Schulman saying to me, nobody ever phoned her when she was at Vogue, where she couldn't necessarily read through hundreds of emails that people were hiding behind. So if someone had the nerve to get through to her on the phone, she may well say, yeah, come in, let's meet. So there's a lot to be said for, I mean, it's much easier to contact these people these days. So maybe a message on Instagram can get great results. And I've always been a little bit cheeky like that. So I fell into running a course, and I think, I mean, I am an efficient person and I can be administrative, but it wasn't particularly what I wanted to do. And I'm sure you're all aware that the bureaucracy and scale of these things has increased so much. You know, there's so much you've got to keep papers on this and reference to this and documentation, whereas when I was a student we didn't even get a mark, and you know, it was actually much healthier for that. This isn't my political mission to change education, but we didn't go to college thinking, oh, I must know what mark I got. We were still very, very competitive. So I had a little break after a while, and I went back into industry, and I knew Julian MacDonald, and he was working on British Airways uniforms, so we did that. And then he got the role at Givenchy, so we did that. But I had only taken 2 years away from Westminster, and I did intend to go back. But when I was returning, they did say, well, do you still want to run the course? Because obviously someone had to look after the course in my absence. And do you know, it might surprise you, but I didn't want to. There's a lovely thing about being boss, because you are sort of the creative director. But at the same time, you know, you were criticized every day. You know, you got very much involved in detail rather than the bigger picture. And I very happily worked for quite a few years for Andrew Groves, who applied for the role and got it. He's done wonderful things with the course, so it was actually quite nice to see it taken further and in a slightly different direction. And then I did get asked from London College of Fashion if I would run the MA womenswear there. And it was difficult. And I remember when I told sort of Andrew, he looked sort of a bit disappointed, because I felt I was letting him down. But I mean, I knew he would manage. And so I'd done 5 years actually as course director at Westminster Fashion, but far longer than that as a tutor. And I was the final year tutor for most of that time, which meant collections and obviously job searching. And I was very involved in the work placement of students, which then was a very rare thing. Positively and negatively, now every student does a placement, so maybe the people employing them don't feel the pressure to then give them a job or look after them particularly well. I'm not saying that again, meaning they're not looked after, but there's such a queue of people, whereas I used to have to fight to get a student in there, because obviously, yes, they were going to be of some help, but they needed to be looked after as well. And you were trying to match the student with the company. And this might not sound the right way of doing it, but they would usually come to me and say they wanted to go to Dior. And because at that time, I didn't really know their work, the mission was to get them in at Dior. And that was also quite interesting, because obviously some of them probably weren't quite polished enough to go to the most esteemed brands, but I took at face value what they wanted to do. If they didn't get it, which sometimes someone happened, well, we had to change our tack slightly. And so I also then ran the MA Womenswear course at London College of Fashion. It was very different because there's a lot of overseas students, and it's a huge college with many courses. So a positive and a negative was you can do a 6-week drawing course there and not have to get in by selection at all. And so they were representative of the college. And then the MA Womenswear, because it was trying to compete with the other best MAs, was supposed to be this sublime quality of the best students and the most beautiful fabrics and a show at London Fashion Week. And so it became a pressure in a different way because people were already putting themselves on a pedestal before they'd arrived, and they were all coming from very different backgrounds, very different educations. And then I probably returned to my own ethos that, you know, doing my own thing and working on in my own way, that is me. It wouldn't suit everybody, but it is me. So I do visit colleges and work on projects, most recently Kingston, which is an excellent college and sometimes forgotten actually. And I have an office in the centre of London where I see students privately. Obviously, lately, people don't want to travel so much, so everything has become online. It doesn't, I guess, make a great deal of difference, but obviously we had space to lay out their work and look at things, and maybe there was the pressure of meeting each other, which is quite good. And
can I ask you a question? You know, you've taught so many students and many very successful students, you know, like, you know, the famous one like Hussein Chalayan and Stella McCartney and, you know, all those guys. So what do you think is the secret of success? What does it take to become a great fashion designer? What does it take to get a job?
Well, yes, I mean, I do sometimes feel a bit wary of dropping names because I have been lucky who I've met, and there are many, and there are also many that have done extremely well, but without having their own label. Most recently, Lorenzo Buzzi, who's at Louis Vuitton, Leanne Callon, who's at McHugh, and Angelo La Barbera, who's just started at Armani. So they're not maybe necessarily names, but they're important contributors to the brand. But answering your question, well, you see, at college, you've got to tick a lot of boxes, and it possibly is about the marks and the grades and being a good student. I don't know that I could make someone amazing if they didn't have the spark, but it's very exciting to groom that spark in the right direction. But so I think qualities someone has to have are ambition. I think, like with many artistic roles, acting, music, you mustn't be put off if people don't like what you do initially. I mean, it might not be great, but I think if it's something you believe in and it is your thing, you should stick with it. But probably top of all, I would say character. Because ultimately people have got to work with you. Even if it's your own business, you've got to lead people. And if you're going to go and work at Prada, they have been doing very well without you for many years. So you are going to have to realize that they are getting something very right, and they're not employing you to rechange everything and criticize everything. You are going to be a contributor. Now, some people have brilliant personalities, whether it's natural, their parents, their life, maybe they've had a charmed life. But we all have to sometimes analyze ourselves and change the way we are. You know, if you're a brilliant designer and sitting in your bedroom sulking, well, nobody is going to see your work. So you have got to push yourself forward, and you've got to believe in yourself. So it takes a lot of soul searching. And I don't think it is necessarily about being able to draw well or to cut a good pattern. All those things I think are very important. But I have had students that have perhaps not performed very well at college, but have done very, very well in the outside world, because maybe doing everything themselves at college, cutting patterns, sewing clothes, managing, producing collections, that sort of thing, was just too much for them. Whereas when they went somewhere where it was a team effort, which college tends to not be, they really, really flourished, because they encouraged a team to sort of work well. But I'm afraid probably in life there is a magic X ingredient in people. I mean, I think if you're a good lecturer, you do encourage that person to bring it out of them, but that's not because you're showing them how to draw well. I think a lot of education could be entertainment, encouragement, motivation. And sadly, I think that can often be forgotten, because you can't really mark motivation. And I've often been told off by the fact that I might say, well, if someone walks into the room, I know they're very good. And they say, well, how can you? Because you haven't seen their work. But I think if someone falls in a room and they're clumsy and everything's falling out of their portfolio and they're sniffing and they're late, you know, it doesn't make for a good beginning. Whereas someone might have picked beautiful fabrics. So it's not about how much work always either. They might just have produced a lovely little book with lots of ideas. And I hope through the experience, because I'm certainly not an expert on everything, I've learned very quickly to sort of recognize that. And I think most brands, designers will also recognize that quality in someone. So it's not necessarily fully singing the full song, but maybe a few notes beautifully pitched.
But and what about when people are applying to study fashion? Would you say the same principles apply, or what you're looking for? Because obviously you taught different colleges with different standards.
Well, you have. I mean, obviously colleges are much bigger now. The numbers are far larger. So this isn't supposed to be a put down, but obviously it arguably is a little bit easier to get in, because there is a bigger take. So that's my iPad. Everybody is expanding. And obviously I feel what the colleges are looking for really is a lot of ideas. And every college has to believe it has something to offer. And I really also believe that. I mean, I've worked all around the country. I don't think you have to be in London. I can see advantages of being in London, and all my Chinese students are very keen to come here or come to New York. They really, really are, you know, whether we've had virus or problems or whatever bad stories they might hear from their colleagues who've studied at some of these colleges. But I think the ideas are the dominant thing. I'm not sure college heads sit and read references in great detail, even though references are often compulsory, and I'm often asked to write references. But I suppose everybody, at one level, everybody would like brilliant ones. So everybody wants the best. With my private tuition, I want the best, because I want to think they'll go somewhere, but that doesn't mean I have no time for anyone else. I think some people, it might be that the college will think they've got potential, but they've got maybe 3 or 4 years to grow, and so it's a slight risk. So you hedge your bets. Some would have done more fashion than others. Some will have had better training. Some tutors know how to present the portfolio very well, which is often, of course, electronic now. But it's still the same issue, that you've got to put things in a good order. Arguably with electronic, there's tricks to make the pages look better. Groups of tiny images work well, because you often don't study that the drawings perhaps aren't actually so great. And you don't notice things like creased paper or torn or crisp packets stuck in the middle, which might all be a turn off. But I mean, ultimately, students are interviewed for places, but I think potential is the main thing. But of course, you know, often people want to enter to be one of the best students, don't they? So because there often isn't a barometer at the time, I think some people really go for it because they're determined to get a place there. Having said that, I think it's still the formula that for BA, they can apply for 5. Well, that's fact. So I guess there is also now a pressure on the college to also be smart. So I believe there's a much more lessening now that if a college sees a student and they know they're good, they might tell them at the interview they want them. Whereas I come from an era where you'd leave an interview barely able to walk and with a tissue clacks sobbing, because obviously they wanted to give you a hard time and make you wait for weeks till you heard. Whereas now I feel students have a lot of power and they're paying, aren't they? They've always been paying one way or another via their parents' taxes or whatever, but now the student is a customer, so they must be savvy and they must grab what they want and get what they want.
We have a question here about, someone's asking, what's your view on Antwerp? What's your opinion on Antwerp?
Well, I've seen much very, very good work. I come across a lot of international students who are looking at the whole of the world. So I said a few minutes ago that there is a priority about London and America, but at the same time, there are, you know, you can study well in Rome, and as this lady has said, in Antwerp, and I've actually seen very beautiful work. What the UK will have to be careful of is that Antwerp is smaller and students might start to compare what they get. You see, one thing is I must get in, I want to go to Central St. Martin's. But another thing that's happening is students are looking like buying a car or staying at a hotel. What do I actually get from the prospectus? And I believe, to answer the question, Antwerp delivers pretty well. They also have a master's program, you see. But because you have the ability now to see a lot of the work, not just on the website, which might be a little bit edited and manufactured, but obviously on Instagram, and I often like to look at students' Instagrams, so I might see them mentioned on the college Insta, but then obviously I can do my own homework on them privately, and that's a sort of little sad hobby of mine, but I enjoy chasing people back and seeing what they've done. You can also tell a lot about students' Instagrams, so I'm not sure how much colleges would admit to it now, but you know, now models have to say how many followers they have, so it's not now about a model just being 6'2" or a woman being, I don't know, 80 chest or whatever and a certain height. It might be much more about their general appeal already. You know, if a student applies to you and they've already got a few thousand followers, that can be quite interesting. And if I sometimes see someone's work and I think, oh, you're very interesting, and I find they've got 5 followers, I think, well, what are you not doing that's about showing your work to other people, if you know what I mean?
And
it's a good question.
We have another question about how to make your work to stand out. Is Instagram the only way, or what else can you do?
Well, it is hard if you're an unknown person, which inevitably can happen when you're very young, because you're starting an Instagram without necessarily having an immediate following, apart from perhaps your classmates or your schoolmates or whatever. And I've been asked that quite a lot about whether someone, you know, should have a different Instagram even for their work. I think that's, you know, I think I'd probably say yes. But of course, some people attract a lot of attention because they look very good, don't they? So they know how to play it. But I would suggest that apart from having a very nice portfolio, which can be about graphic skills, and there's lots of tricks now. I mean, you can even get an app where a drawing can be produced from a photograph. So I never had any of those sort of clever opportunities to rely on. But I often have learned myself from if a picture is very popular, I've tried to think, why? Is it beautifully shot or beautifully edited? If it's a creased old rag of a garment, you know, I think, well, how sad. So people aren't really going to like it, or are they? So I think a little bit of attention has to go into every picture you present, but also you can use Instagram to meet people and introduce yourself to people. Some may never reply, but there's the chance that they might look, and if you've put up beautiful pictures, they may gain an interest. I've got graduates that have still managed to contact great buyers through Instagram and show them their work. But of course, the person that's asked, you're probably very aware that people like attention-grabbing things, and there's nothing wrong with that. But my personal theory is that I would, however bizarre the image, because I've met students at St Martin's who've done wooden sculptures, so fabric wasn't even involved. But I always feel you ought to try and imply, guide, show that there is a really good idea there as well. So if it was a piece of wood, it might be that the textile is still incredible. So you're showing you're very good at textiles, or very good at colour, or very good at scale. So it's a little bit like an X-ray. You can use a very dramatic image, but you've got to remember that at the end of the day, most brands, even your own company, need to sell clothes. And this will inevitably be a tough time, because if a small brand has been surviving on grants and sponsorship and backup money, they need to make their work stand out, but they also need to know how the work can make a big buck. And you've got to remember that the Dior's and the Pradas get a lot of money from accessories and makeup and that sort of thing. And of course, as a small individual, you are not going to have that opportunity.
And actually, I can add one more thing to that, another way to promote your work is to do collaboration. So when you work with other people,
true,
you naturally kind of produce a bigger amount of interest. You have more interest.
Sure. So, I mean, I've always said to people, get out there, meet people, go and find people. You know, if someone's doing a lampshade, there's no point in you trying to only learn how to make a lampshade in an amateur way. Go to someone where that is their craft. Go to someone that can knit amazingly. I'm not trying to get you to use other people's work, but you've got to use what is around you, because perhaps once university used to be about you doing everything yourself and learning to do everything yourself. Although I cheated, for example, we won't go into that. But now, you know, just as when you're doing exams at school, you're allowed to take in an iPad or a calculator or other references. So one can use things. Yes, it's harder to meet people right now because of the virus. You're not even supposed to look at someone, are you? Or you might not even recognize them in a mask. But what I've also been finding is a lot more people now have a lot more time on their hands. So you might not be physically meeting them, but you might find contacting people gets a response that once you would not have. But did I see another question popping up?
Yes, well, there is a comment from Francesca who's saying that you are the best.
How kind of you, thank you. Do I know you?
Francesca Nico.
Are you the one I paid earlier by American Express? Thank you, that's very sweet of you, thank you.
Well, actually, talking about Instagram, I had, you know, a few years ago, I did this pilgrimage in Japan, and it was kind of 40 days of walking in the middle of nowhere. And, you know, I was posting things on Instagram, and someone started sending messages saying, well, you know, oh, this is my city and blah, 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 you should visit this or that. And it ended up being the person who works at Comme des Garçons, he's like head of press and all of this. So meet people randomly on Instagram.
Absolutely. I mean, I think Jess and Kane are with us tonight, who are Time and Smith, and they work together. They have a relationship, and they were both Kingston students. And I think they might feel that when I was pushing them about social media, they weren't so keen. But they've really established a very good and healthy following with what they're doing. And they've also, you know, brought out an album, and there are artists as well. So apart from the sustainable thing, which is so important generally, they've realized how to sort of market themselves. And I think when I originally mentioned it to them politely, they weren't so keen. I'm not saying Instagram is the beginning and end of all, but you have got to somehow reach out and show people your work. And not everybody is based in London. And now you can't run up to someone and say, oh, thank you, they've just sent a message there. So they are here and alive. I hope you've dressed up. I hope you're not drinking, but you know, I think they're a very good example. They knew what they wanted to do, and they told me what they wanted to do. So that I take as granted. But they have learned very successfully about marketing themselves, and one of them is particularly good at animation. So that's become very successful at this time, because how do you show your work other than a runway, which arguably is not too safe right now?
And actually, talking about that,
hi Zita, hello.
There is a next question. How do you see the future of fashion industry after the pandemic?
Well, it's a very good question, and I would imagine a lot of people are discussing this. So I must be careful to not waffle on too much about this, because I have thought about this a lot. I think, sadly, it might make it difficult for some brands who aren't savvy enough to know how to change the way they work. But we get feedback, don't we, that there is a little bit more support now for perhaps smaller, more interesting niche things, little local shops that maybe make special delicacies. You know, there's a lot of talk about getting things locally. So it might mean that a smaller company becomes appealing because they can make their product very unique and very, very special. I mean, obviously lifestyle has changed, and we talk about maybe that the whole of this year we will still, even post-vaccine, have a different lifestyle, and people have got used to a different lifestyle. They're looking to move out of London because maybe they won't be expected ever again to go into work 5 days a week if they're not in a supermarket or a store. So arguably there is you know, there's this whole thing about whether the type of clothes people want will change. So maybe they will want more outdoor clothing to go out and get exercise, and more comfortable things at home that look good on screen. So I'm sure there's still the hunger to look good. But of course, certain things like, you know, an evening dress, I mean, you know, it's probably not such an easy time, and it's not such an easy time even for something like a traditional wedding, is it? I think we all hope things will get back to normal, but perhaps people's values will have changed a little bit more, and they might have realized that I mean, I'm not an obsessively sustainable person. I feel we must all do something to protect the country generally, and well-being, and the air and nature, of course. And I say that to every student, that you must reference it in some way, how little or large, in your work. Some want to be 100%, as you know. But at the same time, people might feel that the clothes they wear at home, they don't need to keep replacing all the time, because there's a comfort factor and a functional factor. So maybe there isn't that pressure to keep having a different jacket every day. Having said that, I mean, people thrive on beautiful things and exciting things. So let's hope that returns in a big way. But there must be less need for accessories, belts, bags, and they are really the cash till, use an old expression, cash till ringers for a lot of the mega brands. You know, they want people to buy lots of purses and bags and that sort of thing. So things have changed, and we're obviously seeing what is happening to those brands that dominated the high street, like Topshop. And I've probably been going in Topshop less without realizing it. The people that were on a burnout before the virus may be even worse off. But it always opens doors for new, and people always want to spend money. But it might affect the type of clothes people are interested in, and it might make some brands that were perhaps less successful more in demand because of the function of the actual clothing.
Before we go to the next question, we have quite a few, Nigel. Here,
oh dear.
Oh dear. Fine, we can manage.
I can feel my rash coming out.
No, fine, don't worry. I just wanted to say that to thank you all for joining us today. We have special promo codes for Nigel's course. So if anyone wants to join, and they start, basically what we did is we have promo codes starting from 80% off, which is, basically free, but we only have one like this. We have 2 70% off, 4 60% off, etc. So basically, first come, whoever joins first gets the bigger discount. And the promo codes are, I'm just going to type it here. It's very simple. It's just Nigel and the percent. So you write Nigel 80 or Nigel 70, Nigel 60, and so on. So this is just a bit of information for the promo codes. And we can move to the next question. And I think this is a really good one. It's about, hold on, where was it? Yes. So Joe is thanking you for sharing your experience.
Yes, and I've seen lots of messages come up, Viola. Thank you for your very kind remarks. Thank you so much.
And the question is, what is your views on fashion MA courses? What kind of value it provides that justifies its high fees? And is it still relevant today for young designers? Which I think is a really good question.
Oh, it really is. And I'll be very honest with you. I don't think there could be one answer, because it's a bit like, what do you want as a customer? Now, I'll try and make this quite concise. I have often found that I see some students, you see, that come to me and they're really no longer students and they're looking for jobs. And so they might have to do a project for a brand. And I must say, it does seem to help to have an MA on the CV. And some jobs even suggest MA qualification is part of the requirement. Now, having taught a lot at MA level, some people benefited because they maybe didn't feel they'd found themselves or learned so much on their BA for whatever reason. I'm not criticizing the BA. They may, I was very naive when I was a student, so to have a further period to study was very, very helpful. I mean, there are plenty of people that have gone on to great success straight out of BA. So one can't just presume that all the successful designers have done an MA. I mean, Phoebe Philo didn't do an MA, Hussein Chalayan didn't do an MA, and a lot of people that have done the MA recently at CSM is because they wanted that launch pad on the London Fashion Week schedule. So they went into the deal thinking, well, it gets me my first show. And as soon as Mary Katransu knew she was going to go in the show, because not everybody necessarily goes in the show if the work isn't up to standard or they haven't finished or whatever, as soon as she knew she was going in the show, she got a showroom afterwards and she knew where she was going to take it. Now, I do a lot of online courses in China for SIA, which is an art educational, it's not exactly a university, but it's the equivalent, and they have sites in all the major Chinese cities and will shortly be opening one even in New York and maybe in London also. So they mean business. Now, you see, those students are arguably in China, of course, and therefore the idea of doing an MA to them propels them into Europe. So a lot of the teaching, we have to say to them, well, is your work very Chinese? Is it very this? Have you not perhaps understood a culture, a different culture for your work? Because they love all those brands that are European, but they need to think, get their mindset into that. So their reasons for doing an MA are quite different. When I meet students from the UK, the big concern is, if they're not going to be offered a scholarship, and these are very, very few and far between, they've either got to get another loan, borrow even more money from their parents, try and work at the same time, which I really admire. But I mean, someone who did brilliantly, which is Gergi Erdi. You know, he went straight to Gucci, and he's now got home furnishings in Matches. He's done brilliantly, but I remember he was always working and never eating. And I used to think, well, is he really benefiting from the time there? Because of course he was paying the fees, and it used to break my heart at the time. You know, I was always saying to the college, that give me the money so these people can get a chance, because I also selfishly, I thought it was very good for the college. But I guess you can't give everybody a bursary, or you can't, you know, give everybody a free place. So it can be good, but you've got to decide that, you know, where is the money coming from? It can propel you up the ladder, but not necessarily. It can give you an opportunity to develop your own style, which is good. So I think a lot of it depends on what you've learned already, but it's certainly no guarantee of getting any further. So a bit like everything in life, whether you want the main course and the dessert, you've got to decide whether it will work for you, and ask a lot of questions. I mentioned the word customer earlier, and you are a customer. This sounds very cynical of me, but you are really going in a university shop and buying a place. You just don't get a carrier bag. And actually, you do get a carrier bag, don't you? It's usually recyclable, of course. So, you know, you've got to ask the questions. So I don't know all of you enough to answer now. If some of you decide to take up the course, there will, of course, be the opportunity to talk a bit more and answer more questions. It's obviously going to be lecture-based, and we'll probably spend the last half hour telling you all a little bit more about what it will involve. But it would be a chance for some of you who perhaps feel, I mean, a lot of people that come to me for private tuition just actually want to talk, and that might sound a bit weird, as if I'm a psychiatrist, but people want time and teaching time. And there is also the argument that if universities are bigger now, this is my last point, you are obviously potentially getting less teaching. And therefore an MA might be more valuable, because you perhaps might not have learned everything you should have learned at BA level, because the numbers have increased radically, beyond radically. And you do the maths yourselves, I don't have to do it for you. How could you possibly be getting that one-to-one tuition and love, which is why, you know, short courses, other courses, additional educational offers are becoming much more considered these days and much more important. I hope that answered in some way. I'm sorry, I think do your homework, look at what's on offer, but remember, you also have the power.
Thank you, Nigel. And we have next question, and this goes back to the marketing and promotion. And Beverly asks you, if influencers and celebrities are important in marketing, and if so, why? And if you have any suggestions about having a celebrity influencer to promote the brand, do you think it's necessary?
Well, hi, Beverly. Hello. Yes, influencer, I suppose, is considered a relatively new word, isn't it? I can see why it can work, because obviously if someone has, shall we say, I mean, I know someone who has almost 100,000 followers. This is just as a friend. And, you know, he wakes up to another 1,000 followers. And I think, wow, you know, that is something else. So the argument really would be, Beverly, that if someone asked him to wear a t-shirt, he is advertising that t-shirt to perhaps more people than would see it in a magazine advert, which would be far, far more expensive. So that is one argument. The other argument, I guess, is that if people are fans of a certain person that's been, they're usually, a lot of them are people that have been on reality shows. So on reality shows, we have that weird thing, don't we? And I watch reality shows, believe it or not, even though you probably think I'm terribly square. I'm the expert. I'm thinking of doing a course on it. People think they know them. So they get terribly excited with things like Love Island, and they think they know Kem and they know him well. And suddenly, because of the viewers, they get like 1 million, 2 million followers. I mean, that is huge numbers, huge numbers. So of course, if they are to do, I think Kem Setine has done something for Boohoo or River Island. And I guess the argument is it will sell product. But he might not be the best person, and he would admit this himself, to sell a Dior jacket or a very overt piece of unique design. So for mass sales, an influencer could be very, very useful. I mean, they even exist for underwear and swimwear and all sorts of things. But for an exclusive product, it probably doesn't quite work in the same way. But then you may be aware that certain people become house names at Chanel, Dior, Natalie Portman at Dior. I'm trying to think who at Chanel. I mean, you know, they're almost employed by Chanel, so they'll go to the show. I laughed with a friend recently because they were plumped in seats at the couture show and they were the only guests and they looked like complete fools, but they probably had no choice. So they are an influence as well, but in a more classy way. So I guess it's at the moment something we can't really avoid. And everybody is flattered if someone buys something from them, because people have been, I mean, when Riccardo Tisci was relatively unknown, Madonna's stylist asked him for things for the album Frozen. So the term wasn't around then, but arguably she was an influencer for that designer because she gave status by wearing it, and suddenly he took off. So it's a broader subject than just that one word. It's really just another form of marketing. I'm sure you can survive without it, but key customers can be very, very valuable to you. And influencers even have their own collection. Kate Moss for Topshop. I mean, she signed on the dotted line, and I'm sure it was a huge amount of money, but it meant on the launch of that night, she had to go in Topshop window, which I didn't think was the most glamorous. You know, so it works both ways. Probably wasn't much fun for her, but the check, I'm sure, was huge.
Okay, let's move to the next question. Thank you, Nigel. But also going back to the influencers, actually, I remembered I worked with a brand a few years ago, and they were looking for a model. And when we got suggestions from the agencies, they literally looked through their Instagrams who got more followers. You know, it's what you were saying before. So
sure.
Real life example. Okay.
Well, and also I was again talking recently, you see those really iconic models. There were shows where you had Linda Evangelista, Kate Moss, Naomi, Christelle, I mean, Carla Bruni. They were like movie stars. Now they weren't influencers then because there wasn't such a thing. Now we have people like Bella Hadid and others who are also fantastic girls, but they probably are also slightly influenced because they came indirectly from reality show programs like the Kardashians. It's a bitter pill, but you just have to swallow it. It happens to be the thing of its time. But Beverly, you might be a young goddess at 19 or 20, so in 10 years we might have quite a different world, but this is the world as it is now, I'm afraid. Sorry, I'm interrupting, Oleg, go on.
Okay, so the next one, Jessica and Case, thanking you for the best guidance.
Oh, how kind, thank you. I'm glad I paid you to say. Thank you again.
And Shoal is asking you a question. It seems to be the self-promotion is really the hottest topic right now. So Shoal is asking, what advice would you give to someone who is trying to cut through the creative noise on social media to carve out a following and successful career, especially post-pandemic?
Yeah, well, again, and as I say, it might be that in the course we introduce the odd thing that we haven't thought was the most important because all of you that join feel you must have a discussion about this. But I do believe with your question that I do really hope that quality will out. And sometimes when you're a small designer and if you have your own brand, you're not planning on selling hundreds of thousands because you wouldn't be able to afford to get that many pieces produced. There are some people that are very happy about keeping their quantities quite small and exclusive and beautiful. And I just hope and believe, as I'm sure you do, that that will still propel you. You're not necessarily trying to get hundreds of thousands of people because that wouldn't be your niche. I think at Aston Martin, they're rebuilding the car that was in the original James Bond movie, but they're only building very few, and the cars are only, I don't think they're even supposed to be roadworthy, because whoever buys them has probably got an estate they can drive around on them. My point about mentioning that is that that could still get great interest, not because people are necessarily going to buy the car, but it's such a beautiful product. So just like a painting in a gallery, you remember all those wonderful painters that didn't have that social media audience then, like Picasso. I mean, why is Picasso so famous? How did people see his work? So I hope there is a way around it and people will be drawn to the beautiful product you hopefully produce, but you might have to contact some people to make sure they've seen it. So when a graduate has a show, we all have great expectations as graduates, or we'll be picked up, we'll be noticed, whatever. But I often say to graduates, well, who did you invite to the show? Who have you shown your work to? They might say, I mean, I don't want to talk like that, obviously, but because I think it is quite an important question. People aren't necessarily going to come knocking. You've got to obviously take it out to them. But sometimes a very popular medium like Instagram, which obviously we know works and can work, Twitter can work, but it might be that people get very excited if they get something through the post. You see, there's a lot of deliveries now because people are ordering online. So suddenly a beautiful envelope through your letterbox might get attention to you that perhaps a post would not. I know you've got to find the address, of course, but
today it's quite possible. You can find all information. You can find the contacts of people who work in the company. You can find addresses. You can ring them. It actually works quite well. As you were talking about Alex Schulman, it's
well, that's right. And I mean, sometimes a student has asked me, and because they're paying me, I've gone and done a bit of homework for them. I don't necessarily know every shop and every place, and sometimes I've been quite surprised that I could find it. Or when you go in a shop and ask and say, who is the buyer? Who is this? Who is that? And I'm sure they will help. People actually get very excited about being asked and being needed. Standing in a shop all day can be a not terribly exciting prospect, and everybody wants the new and the next thing and something that everybody else hasn't got. So that's great opportunity for new people, new creatives.
And talking about opportunities for new creatives, Mo is asking a question. Do you think it's possible to get a job in fashion industry if you just have raw talent without having done BA or MA?
Well, I mean, why not? Why not? I mean, the argument about going to a course, I mean, you think, I've got a BA Honours First degree. It obviously is something to go on your CV at a starting point. So maybe it propels you a little bit higher. But I've often wondered, because after all, you can be 4 years at college, which is a long time, 5 including a foundation year, 7 including an MA, 7 years. Whereas perhaps if you were a little less, I mean, because obviously when we left college, I used to say, well, I'm going to be design director, move over. You know, we thought it was so marvelous, stupidly, of course. But I mean, if you were prepared to start at a company, there was a phrase one used to use, picking up pins. But I think that symbolizes the status. You might start very low. You know, you're just making yourself. It's like people used to get into TV by being a runner or making tea. I think, you know, even successes now, Dermot O'Leary, Andy Peters, people like that, they just got in. And then gradually, maybe you can say, look, I've done some sketches. Can I show you? They might say, yeah, look, why don't you do this? Or you might be in the cutting room and then you might be promoted. I mean, someone like Maria Grazia Chiuri at Dior, she was doing accessories for Fendi, and her Pier Paolo Piccioli were really just workroom heads in the Valentino days, and look at them now. So they have arguably gone up through a sort of apprentice situation. So I saw something come up from Caroline. The fantastic Caroline is here. We should be asking her questions, but I didn't see the question, sorry. So I probably haven't admitted I'm blind, which doesn't always help the job. I can do everything by feel, don't worry. So you know, I think that's a very good idea, but it's a brave idea. You'd have to see if it works. But look, a BA isn't an entry. I mean, this isn't meant to put down BA courses, but you can do now a BA in nearly everything. And you know, fashion schools were fashion schools. Now they're universities, and people like Caroline and I rage about all this, really. You know, I like an art school, but you know, you could work your way up for sure, for sure. I mean, I've rarely had to get out certificates for things. It might look okay, but so many people now have a BA, not meant to be negative, but it's bound to lessen its grandeur, you see.
But I know one example of a person who didn't have any qualification and who designs now for a big brand, but he started as an office assistant, and he's still very young. You know, he's very handsome, blah, blah, blah. So he started as an assistant. Then he got, you know, they gave him to design like logos on T-shirts, and then he started doing small accessories and etc., etc. So he built it up, but it took time.
Well, of course, and you see, it's considered, I mean, you're the expert on this, but it can be considered not so relevant to teach fashion history now. Everything's got to have this sort of research overview. Whereas if you look back at actually fashion history, which is fascinating, the people like Cardan was a tailor at Dior, and then Cardan became this modern superstar. Gautier was an intern, I think, also at Dior. And then Saint Laurent worked at Dior before he set up his own label. And Hedi Slimane was just involved to bring some menswear to Saint Laurent. So there are journeys without having gone through, you know, nobody says to them, what BA grade did you get? Where did you do your BA? There probably is a little bit more of that apprentice culture in France, for example. And so therefore, finding your way in, perhaps Stuart Vivers, who was a student of mine, who is now coach, he was very hungry, and he was just looking for any job towards his graduation time. And so he started looking for accessory jobs at Calvin Klein. I guess he was better at accessories than any of us knew, even himself. But it didn't mean he got stuck with accessories, although he is an expert on that. He didn't get stuck with accessories at Calvin Klein. It's led him to have key design roles and huge success. But his accessory knowledge has been very helpful to the overall thing, because you see shows now and every model carries a bag, because that is the item that brings in the money.
Our next question is, what are your thoughts on eco and sustainable fashion? And do you think it will get much bigger in the future, or stay more of a niche, of a large niche?
Well, you probably heard me say a few minutes ago, I mean, I think we should all look at every product in terms of whether it's harmful. And there have been great movements forward over the last few years. You can make excuses about a fabric you want to use, because this isn't to diss her, but I mean, Stella McCartney uses fake fur, which is renowned for being very, very unsustainable. But she gives it the selling kick that if you buy it from her, you've got to wear it forever. So it becomes sustainable because you're not replacing it. It's probably a little bit of a trend in a way, isn't it? And that's probably healthy that it's a bit of a trend. And I know young designers now, like the excellent Patrick McDowell, that is his mission. And he's even been taken on as a consultant by Pinko to try and encourage them to improve their ways. But at the end of the day, we probably do buy too many clothes. So I think we should always try and consider things. Is it the right width? Is it this? Is it that? I mean, there's talk about zero pattern cutting, but you see, the thing with zero pattern cutting is it often means everything is square and then it's pulled in with elastic or drawstrings. So it can often be quite a lot of fabric, even though you're not wasting any in terms of cutting it out. And also, arguably, has everybody got enough clothes now that the whole fashion industry could shut down, because we could recycle and vintage and remake and repair? But I don't think any of us would really want that to happen, would we? If you see what I mean. So I'm not saying this to stir up politics. I have to be very careful what I say. But I don't think we want that to happen, because after all, the fashion industry is a very huge industry we're proud of. But there is an excess, of course there is, and we all have to think about how many things we should buy. But as interested in fashion, we want to buy exciting things, don't we? So I think the inroad has been made just with electric cars replacing petrol cars, that it will continue to happen, even the packaging and the way things are done. But we probably do waste and buy too many items because we sort of want to look good, don't we? Really, you know, and children's clothes could be passed down to future children and mended and repaired and everything, but would that take us too much back to the dark old days? We are in a modern, really electrifying universe of commerce. COVID's probably been quite good about tapping it a little gently on the shoulder to remind us of enjoying the natural things and not worrying too much about vanity and lipstick and types of shoelace and that sort of thing. But I think there's a healthy balance where everybody's considering it, and all of you should bear it in mind in your working processes, in however little, or ideally, excuse me, however large processes. But there's an expression, greenwashing. I don't know whether any of you, obviously Oleg will know, but you have heard it, and I know Caroline will know, but it's where companies are almost pretending everything is redone, like Bureau de Batak. Alexander Batak produces the most wonderful shows. And there was an incredible presentation for Fendi Couture recently, which some of you may have seen, where it was like really a maze made of glass boxes, and each glass box was an F, and it all looked wonderful. But I mean, is all that glass just going to be chucked in a skip? But you see, people got so excited by the niche of the selling of it, they perhaps forgot a little bit. I mean, things are reusable and they pretend they're reusable, but a lot of those mega brands, I think, are trying to pretend they're more sustainable than they really are by perhaps putting a few trees on the runway. Which have been flown in from another country.
Okay, let's move to the next question, because we have quite a few now. Okay, Umer thanks you for sharing your experience.
Oh, thank you so much. That's very sweet of you. I'll answer quicker now.
Yeah. So does Pauline as well. She says you challenged that helped her, which is great. And Lorenzo is asking you.
Oh, thank you, Pauline.
Lawrence is asking you, what is your opinion about the spreading of technology and the way it has affected the fashion field? Do you think that it has devalued fashion, considering that now everyone have potential access to it?
Well, it's a very good question and could be a lecture in itself. I mean, I don't know whether you're quite asking from the perspective of being a student or the perspective of the world. I mean, I love the whole idea of craft and people touching things and things having a uniqueness, which the very small haute couture industry is hopefully preserving in some ways. But I think technology in every way is a little bit crushing to using humans, but it can be advantageous. And of course, its precision can be very good. I mean, as students, if you're asking from that perspective, so sorry because I don't know you. I mean, we used to sit for hours folding pieces of transparent paper and drawing half a technical drawing and then folding it back and drawing another. And we would use a propelling pencil of a certain width so the line didn't vary in any way. And we were up into the middle of the night, caffeine induced, producing these things, whereas of course now for a young designer, a brand or a student, it's a much easier process on Photoshop. So I think all of you would have to decide whether that's good or bad, really. I mean, if sometimes I show people things I have done, used to do, whatever, they presume that they are actually done by an electronic process, not by hand, because they're quite careful. And of course, even then I used to cheat and I would take them to a photocopier. So the photocopier would give them that final sheen. If your photocopier sounds terribly old fashioned now, but it would give them that sort of sheen. Now people would perhaps scan them in and print them out. So I'm not really saying that is such a bad thing. But I have noticed that people often get very impressed with technical drawings by their neatness, rather than thinking, well, is that actually a beautiful piece of technical design and is it a very clever garment and that sort of thing. So, of course, it has its place and we benefit it from, and it's also speed, isn't it? But I do actually think the very, very creative and the best designers, and even the way Margiela is currently working is, yes, of course, they're referencing technology, but they are also looking at a lot of craft and handwork and beauty and technique, which makes garments special because they are not mass produced. That's the quickest answer I think I can do.
Thank you, Nigel. Okay, let's do the next question. Oh, thank you, Chen. I got the compliment too.
Oh, well, I mean, you are the star of the evening. You should. He has to rein me in and manage me, you see. So he's very good.
Okay, so the next question is, are there any skills learned outside of university that you think are necessary to be a good fashion designer?
Well, it comes a little bit to what I was saying earlier about the whole thing of character. I mean, when I teach, I do try to reference confidence and character, because if you talk about an idea as if you don't even believe it in yourself, how is anyone else going to? But I think out of college, like we've said earlier, you can meet people, you can intern, you can work in different places, you could work for a retailer to see what's sold, and then if you worked for someone like that, you might also have a way of niching your own work into that store, online or reality. So I think it's back to that thing, really, outside college, it's networking. There's a lot of you. You've got to make yourself stand out, meet people, go to things, go out and see things, find the best galleries, find the best fabrics, travel to see things. All of these things are a little harder at the moment, but you can travel online. Can be cheaper.
It's true.
You know, you've got to go out and see things. I mean, Oleg and I were talking earlier or the other day that if you go on holiday, you go and see everything that's there. You feel you should, don't you? You're also free. But, you know, do we embrace everything that is around us? So if you're not physically encouraged to while you're currently at university, and once we're out of lockdown, get out there and go and see things. Take your phone, photograph, get the smell of something, touch it, see it. You know, the whole world is there for you to explore. So you can't possibly expect university to bring everything to you. And wherever you are, I mean, Bath, maybe some Bath students think, oh God, we're not in London, but you know, you've got the wonderful art museums and architecture and air and culture and history. Embrace whatever is around you.
I think that's very good advice. And we did talk about it. And I was saying that, you know, when I go on holidays, I visit hundreds of museums and, you know, in a short period of time.
Yeah.
And while in London, I rarely go to see anything because I feel like it's always available. Okay, so the next question is, hold on, because there are so many.
Oh dear, all these questions.
I'm getting lost. Okay, so Joe is asking you, how would we persist in our fashion vision and keep our motivations while the world is in crisis? How do you personally increase productivity levels in quarantine?
Oh, Joy. Well, I think you've touched on something that upsets us all. The darkness in the morning, the coldness that's coming and going all the time. Well, of course, but you see, in life, if you look at the people you admire, I often find it quite useful to focus on someone I admire. So you might have a hero or heroine who might be a musician, an actor, or painter, but people have always suffered for their art. If they're writing, they face a blank page every day and they say it's like unmitigated hell because how do I write this book? How do we do all these things? But it is you making yourself find that inner strength that will take you where you need to go. It's much harder, but then if you are someone with a tutor now, that tutor isn't going to be with you forever. Your lover might not be there with you forever. You've just got to motivate yourself by, you know, whatever, whether it's meditation, music, as I say, admiring someone strong. If you admire someone, it's very interesting to look at their down periods. Most successful people have a bad time. You know, they're out of work as an actor for a while. They suddenly, you know, find that nobody's interested in their music at all anymore, so they have to slightly adapt their career. I personally find by reading about other people's hardships and also constantly reminding yourself of the people that have done well that you admire, it's hard, but that should help you. And if you surround yourself with a very small group of close friends that you trust, even if it's 2 or 3, try and motivate each other each day. Because I know from when I was at Kingston, we suddenly went from buzzing in the studio to just speaking to people on Skype or Zoom. And it was actually terribly sad. And it's, you know, it is a tough time for everybody, and maybe reminding yourself that most are in the same position could also help you. But fighting to get what you want is the only way. If only there was a quality control that traveled to each house and said, we want you, you're marvelous. You are going to have to make these opportunities for yourself, I'm afraid. And that's why determination, personality, character will always come out top, I personally feel. I hope that helps in some way. We all have bad days where we want to stay in bed, having said that.
But it's true, but also, you know, I think it's important to remember that nothing lasts forever. It will end, you know.
Yeah. I think we also can all forget that we're more privileged at times than we think. Everybody thinks they've been dealt a bad hand, but maybe you have been given this period to study. You know, use it, exploit it. It's there for you. You know, maybe the university can't deliver as much as it should or can, but you've got to find a way all the same. There's always somewhere to cut out fabric, even if it's a garage. There's hiring a machine if you can't afford a sewing machine, asking friends. You know, I was amazed what they did at Kingston last summer. People were posting a garment to a friend to wear and model, to get a photograph taken, to then post the garment back. But it meant the garment got fitted and shown on a model without any social interaction. So it was very clever, really.
Thank you, Nigel.
Thank you.
The next one.
How are we doing with the questions?
Yes, no, I can answer that one. It's Caroline who is asking, will the talk be available to the wide audience? Yes, there will be a recording and it will be on YouTube. And of course, she's saying
Caroline, we can learn from Caroline, who's on iTunes and everything. Caroline is the queen of promotion. Oh, she's very modest about it.
and
because
then
we might need about 20 minutes to talk about the course and questions on that, might we? But I'm happy. I'm free. Carry on, carry on. I didn't know whether some people have their microwave set for 8. Maybe you've all had your tea. I have not.
Let's get through the questions quickly. So we have next one from Dima, and
hello, Dima.
He's asking, how do you see the brands like Alex, Arigato, and Nanushka, etc., becoming recognized nowadays through social media and influencers, while brands like Chanel, Dior were recognized from person to person and high class? I'm not sure what that means. What do you think about that?
Well, I'm not sure I totally understand the question, Dima, but I think I know where you're coming from. I would also suggest that although they've been through August periods, the term August is used not as the month, but meaning a time when things go into a calm, like Patou, for example. So somewhere like Patou is getting a reinvention under Guillaume Henry, for example. You may or may not be aware of that, but you see, there's always this thing about the lifetime of a brand. I mean, we're talking about such a long history to Chanel and Dior that they have a household name before they even start, whereas someone newer arguably has got to prove themselves. And it's rather a sad reflection of history that through something like London Fashion Week, the press are terribly enthusiastic to find a new wonderful name, Matty Boven, Charles Jeffrey, who we all admire and love. But there are so many, I could probably fill 10 sets of hands with names of people that were quite hot at one moment and have just disappeared. So maybe not I'm answering the bias of the question you wanted, but I think the difference with a lot of brands is they might have had many designers, but the house name has got a longevity. So someone working for Burberry, it's not like having their own label, but they've got the thing that Burberry goes back into 1500s or whatever. That's probably a terribly inaccurate piece of history. Oleg will correct me. Whereas if someone's just started their brand, the initial thing is to see if they can even survive 5, 10 years, maybe more. And sadly, many do not. I don't know why that is exactly. Maybe it's the commercialism, maybe it's the lack of support. Some people are stronger, you get new, relatively new, should I say, designers like Olivier Teyskens, who's managed to support his own label and has done Nina Ricci and Rocha and now Azaros. So I can only put it, as I know him, I can only put it down to his own sort of fierce determination, really. And you have to get dealt a hand of luck. I mean, you may not have studied the downtimes of someone like John Galliano, but John Galliano missed a season once and he was penniless many, many times, but had that strength to carry on. And I think he's managed to reinvent himself again. So my tagline about him is I feel he'll be the last man standing, because he says it's good luck, but he has somehow always found how to make something work for him. And every business has its sort of day. Mugler, Gautier, they're really more known now for their perfumes than anything else. So again, you've asked such wonderful questions, but I'm afraid it's going to be about history and time, and we could talk about this for many, many days, not just minutes, I'm afraid. So I hope that's helped to give some sort of feedback from myself.
Shall we just talk a little bit about the course, and then we can answer the other questions? There's a really good one from Georgia asking, where's the line between confidence and arrogance? I think...
Oh, I say. And why are you asking me? I dare you. Well, that's a good one we must come to. Well, look, very briefly, otherwise Oleg will also kill me, but obviously you weren't entrapped here as a hard sell for the course, but it seemed very important that we met if you were potentially interested, or you think there's a friend that might be interested. And of course, there will be a recording of this, which you might want to share because you might think someone will want to see it. But initially, it's a 5-week course, 1 evening session per week, which is just lecture based. We can obviously have questions every week at the end because questions provide answers which are brilliant. But it will just cover, shall we say, the heartbeating parts of the industry. So it's not going to be about what if I haven't got any money, what if I get ill, what if my dog dies, or whatever. You know, this should be about the dream and why you want to do this wonderful subject. So I've mentioned acting before, but if you're an actor or a dancer, you're going through a terrible time at the moment because theatres are closed, it's hard to film. There aren't productions on the West End stage, so to speak. But, you know, you went into it because it makes your heart beat and because you want to make it work for you. So over the 5 weeks, we're going to kind of be and I will prepare the lectures, obviously, and the lectures are recorded, so you get the images after. But the first week will be about research process and discovering ideas, and we'll maybe reference the different ways people approach an idea and some examples. Week 2 will be much more about getting the fabrics. You see, the fabrics are so important, and I can't tell you how often I'm with a young designer, a young student, and they haven't got any fabric samples. And it's not for me to criticize. I work with what I'm given, is my line. But, you know, if you suddenly find a beautiful striped fabric, it's powerful because of its optical quality. So for someone that's got plain cloth and striped cloth, obviously the striped cloth is going to be more useful at the time because it makes more of a statement. So we're talking about how you can get fabric, whether it's from a shop or an exhibition, and textile and fabric design, because a lot of innovation these days is young designers making their own fabrics, because after all, they become unique, don't they? Week 3, we'll be looking at influential designers and their work, and it will probably overlap. It doesn't have to be current, but it will overlap with some of the shows. So there's bound to be a bit of referencing to that. Week 4 would be the whole idea of how you create a collection, whether it's drawn, computer-led, wrapping fabric on a friend, wrapping fabric on a mannequin, wrapping fabric on yourself, and discussing the various ways, which are far more varied than when I was doing this 100 years ago. And of course, you can do it at home if you like, but we'll just be talking about the theory of it, you know, hopefully opening up your imagination about what is possible. I mean, you can cut a square out of paper and put it on someone and sees what happens. And the danger, I know it all too well, is with university, you get so frightened about the size of a stitch, or what size you're working to, or whether it will do this, and what mark am I going to get, and whether it needs a dart, that you can lose all the creative imagination. Look at the wonderful Matty Verboven, who just puts things on himself and just sees what happens. I think one can learn a lot about those designers, Charles the same, where styling is very key to getting ideas. And finally, we'll just talk about, you know, the conclusion of this work. So if you produce this work, how do you show it? What about PR? What about models? What about show producers and that sort of thing? So shall we say it's a champagne journey through it. But obviously, if you are thinking that the same could be interpreted practically, so you would be finding fabrics and showing me, you would be making some clothes or drawings and showing me. I mean, it's not assessed or anything, don't worry, but you might feel it ties in because you've got no idea, because you've had no fashion training, nothing wrong with that, or you might feel it links with your current fashion education at university on a more personal, intimate level. So in series 1, it's simply 5 weeks of lectures. In series 2, you will actually practically do things and homework, but it'll probably be far, far fewer students. Otherwise, you can't obviously all get the attention. I'm not saying we will, but you can lecture to quite a few people, can't you? But when you're actually physically doing it, you know, you need it to be, I don't know, 10, 15, that sort of number.
Yeah, so I think the seminars will be very limited because if you have to give feedback and all of this, so we'll have to be very careful with that. So I
Yes.
think this is a very good outline of what will be happening from next week onwards. And Walid rose hand. Walid, did you want to ask a question or was it a mistake? Because I see I have like a notification that you rose hand, but anyway, if you want to ask a question, you're very welcome, of course. Okay, so right. So shall we go back to the questions that we still
Oh,
have?
and we've got to go back to the question about arrogance.
About arrogance. Well, before we go to the question about arrogance, I just want to remind you that we still have some of those promo codes left. So if you do want to join Nigel's course, you can use promo code Nigel and put the number next to it. We have 80% and 70% are gone. So we have 60, 50, etc. So do join if you feel like it will be beneficial for you. Right. So the next question that we have is, do you want to talk about arrogance and confidence?
Well, I really don't mind. I mean, you know, I think it's also going to, I mean, in a way, arrogance is a very good thing, but you don't want, I think you want to make yourself liked. You know, we touched on this earlier. People have got to work with you, whether it's the bank, employees, employers. So I think a little bit of arrogance is probably what propels some people to superstardom, you know, and some people I used to love listening to Karl Lagerfeld. I don't know how well you know him, but you could look on YouTube and he would just in the most wonderful, dismissive way said, oh, I don't know what people do in marketing. I don't even want to meet them and all this sort of thing, which absolutely made one laugh out loud. But at the same time, I believe he was very sincere and he never felt the work was good enough. And every season he wanted it to be better. So I think it's likability and how you use that. I mean, we've all got to have a bit of arrogance at so, you know, I had to turn up tonight. I couldn't really think, well, what if nobody comes? You know, I mean, you've got to have a little bit. It's self-belief. I think it's just finding the right boundaries. No one wants someone who shouts and rants and attacks people, although we're aware that those people can do very, very well in life, aren't we? But maybe they don't do well in life forever because they make too many enemies on the way. But I think a bit of healthy self-belief and self-importance is a very good thing because, you know, I think of politicians at the moment. I mean, sometimes I think, well, how do they go on day by day getting attacked and criticized? But they obviously feel they're doing the right thing and they've just got to stick to their guns and keep going. So without being unpleasant, I think you've just got to try and find a happy medium. But to believe you can do well and to believe you are great and to have those firm, possibly arrogant aspirations, to me is not a bad thing. Would be my answer.
Thank you, Nigel. And the next question we have from Shola, who is asking.
Hello, Shola.
He's asking, it's going back to technology. So he would like to know if technology has taken away individuality from a lot of design presentations, as they once were with hands-drawn sketches and collages. So what do you think about that?
Well, I mean, obviously, it's a bit of a broad question because if you're talking about something like shows, if we're not looking at this COVID period, there are more fashion shows than ever, and technology has helped everyone access and be able to see that show. Whereas once, you know, I can remember buying every newspaper every morning and throwing out this, don't go down the sustainable route with me, but, you know, almost tearing out the few pages to try and get an image. So that has helped in some ways. And there are processes that can be used creatively, like, I don't know, laser cutting or Zund. Both are similar. Zund is a little bit more like a scalpel method, whereas laser is a bit more like burning. which can create the most wonderful effects that arguably can be done as well by hand, but maybe the machinery makes it a little bit more perfect. And of course, a tailor like Armani, who you might not register as a wow designer, but at Armani, a lot of modern technology is used to do the tailoring, gluing on interlinings, which once would have been done by hand, but the quality becomes very good. So obviously, I love the idea of a sort of Savile Row suit and the beautiful workmanship that goes into it, of course. But we know it's for a limited number of people. And to learn those crafts yourself are great. But I think it's sort of each to its own, and I shouldn't be forcing my disciplines on things. And it also becomes about cost, you see. So some people say, well, we couldn't afford that, so we want a similar product. So something like jeans that have become very popular, well, now a machine can nearly make a whole pair of jeans in a sort of robotic process. A shirt cuff, which is very difficult. I mean, I don't know how many of you have made a shirt. A shirt is a really good test because it's very tricky. But of course, you'll go to a shirt factory and a machine can put on the cuffs beautifully. And is that a good thing? Is it a bad? I think you'd have to decide for yourself. But I do feel, for example, 3D printing has invented something that arguably might be better than hand. Iris van Herpen is couture, but uses machinery to do these things. I think we just have to accept it if it works well and see it has its place.
I agree with you. I think that was a very good answer.
Well, I'm quite surprised myself. I wish I'd written it down. But you know, a lot of these things, I mean, I'm flattered that you ask me, but I think, you know, it's a bit like if you don't like milk in a carton, you don't buy it, but then you've got to find a way of getting it from the cow. You know, so some of these methods protect us from the harsher processes. You know, I know we're not talking about fashion, but it's the same thing about technology, isn't it? So I think, you know, arguably it's technology that's made all this online happen, and some people think it's a tragedy because it will damage some retail outlets, but then some people are doing very, very well. Who'd have thought someone like ASOS would do so well with just producing garments and people buy it from a picture? But it's so easy to return anything, and wealthier people buy 3 pairs of jeans, try on, find the one that fits best and send it back. And they're sort of saying, well, it's much less cruel than me being embarrassed changing in a group changing room. So you get 50-50 on the arguments, I'm afraid. And we just have to embrace it all, because I doubt it will go away, sadly. I'm not so keen on the idea of designing on screen, although I've had students with the most magnificent results, because I think it's quite hard to achieve that 3-dimensionally. However good you can spin the fabric on screen and light it and give it texture, whatever, you've arguably got to make that exist in reality for someone to be able to put it on. And the danger with this period at the moment is I see a lot of exquisite work, because there's no 3D, everything is screen dimension.
The next question is from Azita. Hello, Azita. I remember I taught you.
Oh, and Azita is a great fan of yours more than mine. Hello, Azita. I'm thrilled you're here. Thank you. Because you're in a weird time zone, so I'm very, very flattered. Thank you.
She's asking you if you think it's necessary to include marketing business into the university's schedule.
Well, you see, it can be terribly boring unless you've actually got something in mind. So this is an odd example and goes back many, many years, but I did know, maybe some of you don't know Christopher Bailey now, but Christopher Bailey was very, very successful. He was known invisibly, arguably, at Donna Karan and then at Gucci. So he was known to be there, but his name wasn't used. And then he became the designer creative director at Burberry. And of course, it was Burberry that was the brand, but people always talked about Christopher Bailey as a designer. And he used to joke with me, and because obviously I kept in touch with him, and he used to say, well, I knew absolutely nothing about business, I wasn't interested, but I didn't really want to know. And yet his role at Burberry with the wonderful Angela Ahrens, who is now Apple, they had a symbiosis and relationship in that they could discuss things, but she would worry about the pounds and noughts and whatever. Often a criticism when I was course director at universities was, we're not taught any business, we're not taught this. And I do believe there is a place for it, but I have to say that although Azita might have been very good at doing it and very willing to do it, a lot of students don't see the point at that time. Because the slight danger with business is you can make the figures add up to what you need. So you might think, well, I need this money for my salary, this money for the rent and whatever. And all you can do at that stage is you bump up your sales to get the revenue to pay the bills. So you make a perfect equation. Whereas in reality, I remember Betty Jackson telling me that she would make some garments more expensive, a higher profit margin, because she knew she could get so many hundreds of pounds for a coat. Whereas even though the top might be quite expensive, she couldn't compete at the cost that the top would actually come out at, if I've explained that properly. So the right profit margin would make the top too expensive. So she had to sort of lose on the top and put extra on the coat, for example. Well, you see, she only really learned that by being thrown into the lion's den of surviving. So you can do the theory of business. And of course, what's been quite exciting about fashion education is that there are now so many different types of fashion courses, not just fashion design. But I do often think the business side is a great skill and of great ability, and it works really well with something like Tammy Kane, the sister of Christopher Kane, where they work together and she does some of the work with him and he concentrates on the design. And I personally believe you need a strong business person to advise you. I've nothing against it being taught at college. It used to be, I think it's one of those things that's been cut because of budgets. But it was something that students always asked for, but then they never attended the lectures. It was one of those strange things. Oh, it's vitally important, of course, but I don't know whether you're better off finding your way with the bank once you leave college. And not everybody wants to become a businessman or run their own label, you see, either. So you know how it is, Azita. It's probably a little bit of an open-ended question, I'm afraid, depending on circumstance.
And another thing, you can't do everything. It's better to be good at one thing and then find someone to work with who is good at business.
Well, because remember, people study business for the same length of time as you study fashion, don't they?
They do.
So I'm a bit of a naughty person. I always sort of think we'll get the product exciting and the rest will take care of itself. I'm sure that's not quite true, but I think the most important thing is to get interest and get it all rolling and then face. There's plenty of places out there that can advise even for no charge, because if you have a business account with NatWest, they show off that they give you that advice as part of the deal, you see.
Okay, shall we move to the next question? Oh, thank you, Walid. Walid saying that we're both very charismatic. So.
Oh, thank you so much. We're very honoured to have you here, Walid. I'm worried that you're analysing our business knowledge and thinking yours is much better. Walid knows how to market his clothes.
It's true. Actually, I was talking about you with some of my Japanese friends. You have a huge following in Japan. They love what you do.
Well, it's probably because of the craft, isn't it, for anyone that doesn't know Walid's work. And And obviously you've been confident enough to charge because they're like pieces of art, so they have to be expensive. So that arguably, I don't know how many of you know Walid's work in depth, but that's part of his strategy. And Lorenzo, who is now, I was showing off, is now at Louis Vuitton. Well, he trained under Walid, so I must obviously share. You see, it's also the experience people get from everybody. I can't take credit for all of that, but I hope a tutor can have some sort of influence on a young person, young designer, as a mentor.
I think we do. And then Moore is said that he booked codes book before the promo codes. It's okay, don't worry, I'll email you and we'll give you some benefits if you like. And then hold on, let me see if we have.
You're getting coupon questions now. Thank God I have no business knowledge. You see, you're going to find out in the coming weeks that I rely heavily on the creative side.
So someone called S is asking you, what is your fondest memory of your teaching career to date? And the second question is
two questions, a double.
Two questions from S. Well, I just read both so you can answer both.
Okay.
So the second question is, what course, in your opinion, has never been taught or taught properly in fashion school and should be?
And what was the object of the last question? What course?
Which course hasn't been taught, has never been taught or taught properly in a fashion school?
Gosh. Well, to answer the second one first, because I think it's very expensive to do, and I have known it taught very well, but I still think pattern cutting suffers badly. And for those of you that don't know the fashion school, which Caroline is here, I'm not just doing this to charm Caroline. We're not marrying or anything, don't worry. But you see, what's lovely is her young students, who are between 8 and 16 years old, I believe, are learning the craft, not just the design. And I think that confidence to cut a piece of fabric and play with it is very important, but it's expensive in terms of space and it's expensive in terms of teaching. So wherever I've worked, I've wanted to provide as much pattern cutting as possible. Whereas the slight danger of this pandemic, where people are working at home and they don't have the space, and it's very hard to teach it online, again, Caroline will agree with me, that it may suffer even more. Now, the problem is, you see, there's lots of pattern cutting jobs, but people don't always want to be a pattern cutter, they want to be a designer. But you see, the pattern cutting is almost the architecture of the clothes. So I think it's suffered by the numbers of students increasing, and it has been weakened. And again, if she doesn't mind me mentioning, because Caroline has her own school, people think I've got my own school. I think at one point I did have 100 students, so probably arguably I have sort of got my own school, but Caroline's is a school based in London and Brighton. And I did notice, Caroline, that the highest number of views on your Instagram, I think, is where someone was demonstrating the technical side, which I just thought was very interesting. All these big wigs showing off, saying they know about style, like me, but that's considered very, very important. What was the other question? Which Jay's got two very good questions.
And the first one was, what is your fondest memory?
Fondest memory, that's right. Oh God, I should have just pretended. That is a difficult one. If it's a more of a general answer than one specific, and this is going to sound terribly fake and sort of gushy, but I've never really sought success for myself. I've never really sort of thought, I want to win this, or I want an award, or anything like that. I've never really been terribly interested in the trappings. Whereas if a student does well, I do feel I've been partially, even minimally involved, sometimes more involved. And I do find that quite electrifying. I really, really do. And I remember once we did this competition with Smirnoff, and the students didn't really want to do it because I think they didn't think it was stylish enough. And now I think Smyrna's probably got quite a good reputation, hasn't it? Particularly in lockdown. But it was a corny competition. They wanted to do their own thing, and it was quite difficult to manage and teach because they were frustrated. So they were almost angry with me, and it wasn't really me. And at the same time, I was sort of thinking, well, look, come on, we've got to do this, because it was a little bit at the time that the colleges were competing within this competition. So it wasn't about who thinks the product is the most beautiful. It was who could do well in this. And we were waiting for the numbers to come in, and so university had 2. And I thought, well, if we could get more than 2, it would be great. And blah, 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 blah. And it was a fight. So it was also quite good because we started to get on better as student and tutor, because I had to make them do it, but not feel like I was letting them down either. And we got this magic number of 17. So 17, which was absolutely great, because I think, most had 2, 3, 4 or whatever. So it sounds probably a very silly thing, but it was actually very, very exhilarating, because it had been a dark moment. And I sort of thought, God, we're not going to do very well at this, because it wasn't the sort of thing they wanted to do, and they weren't used to presenting work in an appealing way. So I had to do a lot of mentoring in terms of, look, you've got to do it like this because people will like it. And, they weren't interested in things like spray mount. And I remember the day the work had to be handed in, we were nearly asphyxiated with spray mount. Now I don't think you're allowed to use it. It was nearly a drug. But I could explain a lot of my downfall problems after that. But, they had to be shown how to present work. So it was bringing discipline later in their life. And sort of, it really, really worked in terms of bringing us all together, because I suppose there was the proof at the end that it was worth the fight. But generally, I think if they do well, I find that very, very exhilarating. But it's not because it's for myself. I just think, well, they've gone on this ambition and journey, often with no funding or problems or personal problems or a parent being ill or an illness. And I find success very, very appealing. I really, really do. It's not about getting high marks or things like that. I've always been interested in the student's journey, which has sometimes made me very unpopular with the mandarins, shall we say, who are budget conscious.
Yeah.
So I hope that are 2 very good questions. But I don't know whether they were the sort of answers you were expecting.
But that's the answers you got.
Good luck with those. I did my very best. I'm sorry.
You did, Nigel.
Complain to Oleg.
I think that was the last question, actually. So,
is there anything else as we're I was just conscious that it becomes a bit messy if we suddenly add an extra hour, because I know you've all got other things to do, but if anyone's suddenly come up with a thought at this last moment, we're free for another 5 or 10 minutes if it helps you.
Exactly. So you're very welcome to ask more questions.
I can hear cans opening and the screw top of whiskey bottles coming open.
We have one question from Iduna. I'm not sure if I'm saying the name correctly, but go for. You can ask with voice if you want. You can turn on your microphone.
Yes, I thought we were going to get personal questions. When it's the course, you're going to have to be a little bit more involved. Oleg isn't your assistant. He's been very kind tonight to me and you.
Well, yeah.
Hello, good evening. I hope you hear me.
Hello. Oh, thank you. Now I feel we've put the spotlight on you. I'm sorry about that. Lovely to meet you. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Beautiful.
Thank you very much for this Zoom meeting. It's really insightful so far.
Oh, that's very sweet of you. Thank you for coming.
And I am not yet in the fashion industry because I'm still rather young and just about to start my studies in like a year or so, and wanted to ask if you have some advice for someone who is before or about to apply to college and get started.
Yes, of course. Do you mind me asking how old you are?
I'm 19.
Okay. So I was guessing it must be about that because of your stage in the journey. Well, you know what's really very, very nice is, if I'm honest with you, I think I knew I wanted to do fashion. Well, I did actually, but I wasn't quite as focused. You sound very calm about it, as if you know that is your destiny.
Yeah.
Am I to presume you're initially looking at foundation courses?
Please, can you repeat the question again?
Yes, I'm sorry, and I do talk very quickly. I'm sorry about that. Well, often what happens if you're considering a degree course is you would do a 1-year foundation course prior to that. And that can be quite useful because although you can enter saying you want to do fashion, you will also cross over the other disciplines of maybe graphics or art. And I found that very, very useful. So I had friends that thought they wanted to do fashion that changed their minds. But I did want to do fashion, but it gave me a more broader artistic knowledge, which I probably didn't have at that time, I'm afraid. For whatever reason, I'd had rather an academic introduction to the world. Do you know what city you would like to be in?
Yeah, I was the first question with the school in Antwerp because that's like my dream.
Now I know the bias of it. I think it's very important, you know, like I've mentioned, you're customers and you have a lot more power than you realize. I don't think it really should matter where you study because talent and determination will out. But I was a little bit sort of naive and a bit fearful at that age. But I don't know where you're based, but I feel if you're prepared to travel, you of course get the experience of other cultures and you meet other things. And if you were considering Antwerp, I mean, it has a very, very good reputation, but I have to be honest and say I've never actually been there. I've only seen the work online or video, you see.
Yeah.
But
do you know what you'd like to do? This is a strange question, but it's quite a rare. Do you know what you would like to do one day? Do you have an aspiration?
Actually, yes. I'm really interested in like the really conceptual fashion.
Okay.
Comme des Garçons and also Iris van Herpen are like my top
wow,
favorite.
Yes, and I can see why.
Yeah.
Right.
So if I have the chance, I would definitely prefer to make something more in that direction.
Yes, and I feel, to be honest with you, that could affect your decision of where you applied. You know, I do feel it's not that I'm promoting one college more than another, because I've honestly come to know strengths in all for various reasons. But I think to be understood and to get that right type of artistic staff, you would benefit from somewhere like Central St. Martin's or Antwerp. That much I do know for a fact. So I think by studying the graduates from those colleges, which hopefully you will eventually be one of those, this could be very useful for you to see, yes, I want to follow that pathway and I want to come out with that sort of integrity, because there have been a lot of very successful conceptual designers from Central St. Martin's, Jane Shepherd, Finton Walsh, Hussein Chalayan, you probably know, everyone knows more about him. So it might be that you need to be in the right creative environment with the right rivals who would push you, if you know what I mean.
Yes, I absolutely agree.
I think you've got to believe you'll get in and they might understand you more. But like I also mentioned, I think it's also very nice with a conceptual designer, because you see, you've got to realize with someone like Com, they have those wonderful shows with very few outfits, which are these larger than life monsters, aren't they? But at the root of Comme des Garçons are wonderful perfumes and scents in beautifully designed bottles. And of course, huge ranges like Comme des Garçons shirt, which are still unique garments, but they have more of a consumer appeal. So I don't want to dilute your creativity, but I think what's very interesting, which people often forget about Com, is they really have a very, very successful business, even in terms of selling other people's work at the Dover Street Market stores. What's fabulous about Iris van Herpen is she has managed to push her work into an haute couture world and territory, and things are very recognizably hers, I feel, don't you? So I think she's an astounding success because she really doesn't do very commercial pieces, does she?
Yes, I definitely
And
agree.
also, I'd like to add something. Actually, if you want to study at St. Martin's, you will probably have to do a foundation course, because I think it is one of the requirements. I used to run fashion communication course there, the BA, and we didn't even look at applications from people who didn't have a foundation or something similar. I mean, I tried, but the administration always tried to prevent me from that. So,
yeah, I mean, and I've had to learn a lot more about this, Oleg, because I'm asked it a lot. But my advice to you would be, have the dream journey for now. I don't mean Oleg, I mean this lovely lady. Have the dream for now, but look at where your pathway would be. You've got to think that, is it good then that you do the foundation at Central St. Martin's, because you will get the feel of the atmosphere of the college, but it doesn't necessarily help you anymore to get it accepted by it. But you will at least.
From all sorts of people, but that was.
Sorry, we just had someone. I muted them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say that you might get more of this. You might meet more like-minded individuals if you do the foundation at Central St. Martin's, but you can't presume it's a direct entry to the BA, but it will give you a better idea. What's great is that you already know yourself. I don't think I did at that age. I was still finding myself. So, you know, we want you to experiment and be brave. And that's where the badly used word like arrogance, which I'm sure I'm going to encourage people in the wrong way. I think you've got to be a little bit strong. You come across very well because one feels you have a steely determination, which I think is actually very, very important, because maybe not everybody will believe in what you're doing, and you're going to have to convince them. And also look at some of the recent graduates from CSM that are a little bit conceptual, like Bradley Sharp, for example, who's from last year and very exciting. And maybe I'm trying to think of another who I spoke to earlier, funnily enough, but there are a few. Check out, there's plenty online. Start doing your homework, because that will probably motivate you as well.
And yeah, sorry, go on.
Thank you very much for.
Oh no, thank you very much. It's a very poignant question, and I wish you every success in your journey.
And we have a question from Jake, who is asking, is there a specific way to start an art portfolio that could get you into CSM? And so, well, if you want to start a portfolio and you don't know how, you can join Nigel's seminars. Which
isn't he cheeky?
Well, but it's true. You know, like first we'll have lectures, and then you'll have seminars where you actually will be working on a project. So, but Nigel can give you now a kind of.
Yes, I mean, I do get asked lots of questions about that and how many pages and that sort of thing. And it's very hard to put a number and a specific on it. But it comes back to that main point that I feel any lecturer will be looking for creativity. So whether the creativity comes through computer-aided design or sketches or large sheets of work or small sheets of work, it arguably speaks to the same sort of thing, I would suggest. And, you know, then I think you've got to get your vision over. So of course, it's lovely for universities if you can draw beautifully, and if your color is good, and if you've got lots of ideas, and you are also showing your artistic side, not just your fashion side. So I feel at that stage, there should be some art. Have you got paintings? Have you got architecture drawings? Have you got other things? I think on these occasions, it's very important to show your overall art and colour skill, not just fashion information.
And I can add something because I teach, well, I've been teaching portfolio classes for many years, and I can tell you what I tell all of my students. I don't know, are you my student or not? But anyway, so I
15.
Sorry?
He's
Okay.
15.
He's 15. Okay, so
Yeah.
the two things that I tell my students, it's originality and clarity. So if your ideas are clear and your ideas are original, that will get you in any college. So this is two key things, because if you have something different to say, something exciting, then you will get accepted. You know, when I was applying to CSM, I didn't do anything before that. I studied law. I studied international law for 5 years, and then I decided to move into fashion. So I really had no background in drawing or anything really. So I just did what I kind of learned bits and pieces from people around me. And because my work was very different, because I didn't have any background, I got in. If I studied at foundation, I might have not gotten in. So it's really about trying to...
Yeah, and you know, you're saying something that I was also thinking in my mind. I mean, you see, you've got to remember these days they're looking at a lot of portfolios. So something unique, which one can't always tell over the phone or over Zoom, you've got to make it stand out. Quality, interest, creativity. And every college, every designer brand wants someone with lots of ideas. It's no good just having 2 drawings and hoping that is enough. And also you can see other people's portfolios sometimes online, and you can see, for example, colleges' work on their Instagram page or on their website. So have a little look to give yourself some, I mean, it won't be what you're necessarily got right away before you've started the course, but it might give you some idea of the type of work expected.
And now is a very good time to do that, because all graduate shows from last year were held online. So all the graduates' work is available on their website somewhere. You just have to look for it. I know CSM did it, RCA did it, you know, all colleges did it. So you can see graduate portfolios from everyone, and you kind of can see the principles they use in order to build the portfolio. So I hope this helps.
Absolutely.
And the next question we have is from someone who's first year LCF menswear and who's struggling with making garment into a real thing from his designs. So do you have any advice?
Yes, are you BA?
Yeah, BA first year.
Yeah. Well, don't forget, you're
actually,
very...
sorry, I don't know if BA, it just says LCF, first year LCF, so I don't know.
Yeah, I would think because the MA is only a year and a bit, it sounds like BA, doesn't it? So I hope I'm yes, he said yes, BA. Thank you, Key. Thank you, Key. Well, don't forget, you are at the very, very beginning of your journey. You know, you're just starting, really, aren't you? But it comes back to what I was saying earlier. I'm sure because of the numbers, there isn't so much one-to-one tuition, because there just can't be, and it's a huge subject. With menswear, unless you're one of those menswear designers that wants to put men in dresses and robes and that sort of thing, often menswear does focus on shirts, jackets and trousers, if that doesn't sound patronizing of me. So I would suggest with menswear, because the finesse can be so important and the proportion and the scale, whether it's tailoring or even sportswear, I would suggest you start investing in some source pieces. And what I mean by that is you might find a wonderful vintage jacket in a second-hand shop, sometimes for very few pounds. Make your brief, the cheaper the better. Or you might have a friend who has a beautiful jacket and you borrow it. Same with the trouser, same with a shirt. And try and take the shapes from those. So copy the shapes initially, which might sound like strange advice, but you're not exactly trying to reinvent the jacket, are you? We're presuming you want it to have sleeves and a collar or sleeves and a V-neck. And then you can start building your own imagination into it. So it'd be like making a cake. One doesn't usually go beyond the realms of a circle or a square or a rectangle. I hope I'm not undermining creativity here, because I don't know your work, but I think you need much more of an understanding of real clothes before you start bringing in your own uniqueness. So you might find when you have a jacket to play with on the male mannequin or on a friend or flatmate, as long as it's safe, of course, you can actually start folding, pinning, manipulating one of those garments to take it in the direction you want. And you will probably find at college they've got lots of blocks. The block is the basic shape for a jacket, the basic shape for a skinny trouser, the basic shape for a tailored shirt. Copy those off, make them up in cheap, if you like, dead stock fabric, and play with them. And you will learn so much by interacting in 3D. You're probably sitting worrying about it. As I say, I'm sorry, I don't really know you very well. So, you know, I can't say, oh, you're trying to do this, why not do that? But it sounds strange, but you've got to know a lot about the basics before you can start putting your own magic in. It really will help you, I can assure you. Or if you've got certain design lines you're designing, get some tape. You can buy sticky tape that is for marking seams and put your design lines on a jacket that already exists or on the mannequin itself. There's always a way, don't worry. One day you might never have to do this. You see, someone might be doing it for you. So initially, you've just got to show your ideas as a garment to a wider audience.
It's almost like, you know, to paint like Picasso, you have to first learn perfect academic drawing, which what
I would think so, yes. I know you probably want to be crazy and magical, but initially you probably, you know, it's a bit like, you know, learning how to make something the right way before you destroy it and invert it and turn it round and do a Margiela process to it. That's why the original Martin Margiela was considered so popular. What designers do you like, Kay? Have you got a favourite brand?
JW on this.
Ah, okay. Well, I mean, I feel he's very experimental with there being a femininity in the menswear and a masculinity in the women's wear. But I feel often his clothes have an essence of reality. So he isn't totally reinventing the jacket. He's giving a magic touch to the jacket and by what it's worn with. So another great idea is work on the bigger picture first. Try some different garments on together to get a story and then worry about each garment at a time in terms of turning it into 3 dimensions. There's nothing wrong with looking at clothes that already exist because you will understand how they're made and how they're cut and their proportions and scale. You can also buy clothes and return them, which is terribly naughty, but it gives you the chance to feel them, especially perhaps when shops open again. There's a shop very, very near you that has J.W. Anderson. You could go in and try on a few things so you get the feel of them and you understand their architecture. It's not a flat shape. It's revolving around the circumference of a body, you see. But you're probably worrying a bit too early because you're only just starting, aren't you? The good thing is you know it worries you. You've got 3 years to resolve it.
Okay, let's do a few more questions and then I think we'll have to wrap it up.
Because I have to bath my children, you see. I don't know why everyone thinks that's funny.
Hi, Luke.
Shola wants to ask something.
Hi, Shola.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for taking time to speak up.
Oh, no, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you. So I have a question, and it's of you said something earlier about not starting fashion from a fashion perspective. And I wanted to ask you, what do you think is the best way to combine an academic experience with a design practice without coming across as preachy or disingenuous?
Well, what a beautifully phrased question and lovely tone of voice. I sort of think I know what you're asking. Are you meaning that you wouldn't really want to ideally study fashion in the traditional way?
So I have a degree in sociology and anthropology, and I'm in my final year at SAF,
Okay.
womenswear.
Okay.
And I find both facets of my life, I'm keeping them separately. And the only time I ever sort of like merge them together is whenever I do CHS, like Cultural and Historical Studies.
I
That's the only
understand.
time
Yeah.
I apply my, that background with.
And you're in your final year, aren't you? Did you
Yes,
say?
I am. Yes, I
Yeah.
am.
Well, it's very interesting you saying that, and I don't want it to sound like I'm criticising the college, but I do sometimes think by showing off and offering these specialisms, you can indirectly confuse the student about what their aims eventually might be. Do you sort of know what I mean?
Yeah. Like right now,
And
for
so,
instance,
yes,
I'm worried about, okay, if I want to create a design practice, which I do
right,
want to do, and I
yes,
have some ways I'm trying to challenge like the industry, if I
I
can do
see.
that as a pin in the cog. But I find that there's some other conversations I would like to have without necessarily going down the route of like show studios or giving up completely my creative side.
I
Um, I, I,
understand.
so I'm just trying to. Is there a way to have these conversations in a meaningful, impactful way without the mass audience sort of thinking it's just
I know,
another.
I know.
It's just
Well, you see, you're
clothes.
probably a little bit torturing yourself as an artist, aren't you? I mean, I feel you've decided at the right time about this because you're going to have to do a final year project, aren't you?
Yes,
And
that's what I'm
you
doing
know
right
that
now.
London College of Fashion is very, very keen on collaboration. And I think while you are within that framework where there's practical studios, there's Mare Street, there's the laboratory in John Prince's Street, and I presume access has been a bit difficult as well. I think you should really try and put all this emotional energy into your final project so that your career destination when you leave, remember you're only beginning. We've all been through that torture of thinking, well, I'm leaving, I don't know what I'm going to do, I don't know whether it's good enough. You know, life will take you in the direction you need to go, I'm sure, with your determination. But I think you should exploit the college at this last time of your study so that you bring in some other elements to your final work that give you this profile you are talking about. Because I presume you're given a relative amount of freedom, which can sometimes be a bit difficult, can't it?
Yes, and unfortunately, the situation of the world right now isn't helping. So
Well,
everything
you've
is
been very
quite
unlucky.
limited.
I mean, we didn't want to be doomy tonight. Remember, we said tonight was champagne, but you've obviously been very unlucky because you're probably being limited a bit practically, aren't you? But you are at the
Yeah.
beginning of your journey. And whether you have to do it in a more two-dimensional way at this stage rather than 3D, or try and put the computer practice even by collaborating with a friend or a colleague. Remember, lots of students are struggling out there and might want to just work together whilst you still maintain your own individuality. I don't mean you're going to be trapped together for graduating and the rest of your life, but I think this is the chance to bring in what you're talking about into your final year of study and your final product, because it sounds like you have the intelligence and thought that you know what you want to achieve. And if you're looking at other elements in fashion which might be less crowded with applicants, like, you know, for example, show set or show production or whatever, that would be my initial advice in a quick answer.
Thank you. That does actually help a lot. Thank you.
Well, I hope, because it is a little bit difficult without knowing the work, as I've said to other people that have joined us tonight. But be greedy as a student. There's a terrible feeling I find when I see people privately that they think, well, should I ask? Should I say I want this? Write to people. There's hundreds of staff at LCF. I mean, Oleg, you know very well, don't you? You know, get the chance to connect with people. Maybe one of the researchers could help you, like, I'm trying to think who would be good for you off the top of my head. I shouldn't have started this because now I can't remember the name. But I think you could maybe get involved with one of the tutors of research who would be able to pinpoint you and push you in the right directions of the various facilities available to you at the college.
Thank you.
That would be my advice. I think you've got so much there, and the people that do best exploit it, you see. You know, because they've got all sorts of people that can help you with your future careers, haven't they, and that sort of thing. I really would get involved and exploit them. I really, really would.
But I honestly wish things were back in a normal time, because there are few things that are very important to me. One of them is my pre-collection was about my personal mental health, because I find that as creative people, it's very often untalked about. And we all paint the industry like it's one nice glossy magazine sheen, where in fact we are pouring exactly who we are into what we do, and we're putting it out there for criticism. And sometimes not everyone is tough enough to withstand it, and people find different ways of coping. And that's a conversation that I want to carry on having. Also, I want to have conversations about using clothes in a completely different way and how we relate to clothes as people. And I just find
find
that
to interrupt you here, because we have a few more questions. And
sorry. Like, thank you so very much.
Oh no, but I'm sorry it's a bit rushed, because you probably wanted tutorial. But look, you've got a lot of very good staff there. You've got to search them out, write to them, and have a Zoom meeting with them. They are there to help you. And particularly, I wish I could remember his name. He's a fantastic guy that's very understanding of these things. But get links via research. You have paid for this. You must get your money out of the last few weeks, because you've all gone through a very unfortunate situation because of the virus, but it shouldn't let you stop you in your tracks. And you sound very intelligent and thought-provoking in your work. I hope we'll meet again anyway. Nice for this quick chat now. Sorry, it's so brief.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shola. And let's do the last question we have from Chan, who is asking, how to really focus on your aesthetic and style. She often gets influenced by designers, although not looking at their current collections, but still remembering their design. So I guess it's about how to make the work more personal. Are you first year, Ken, or second year? Maybe, hold on. Second year. Well, you're having aesthetic and identity right now, so that's the project about that. But anyway,
well, you know what some students don't like, Chen, of course, is that they feel they want to do what they want to do, and there's various projects that have to be done in a certain way. But that can also happen in the real world. So the important thing is you recognize that it's a minor problem, and you must try and put your aesthetic and style into everything you do. Now, I often come across students that don't want to look at anything around them because they think that will stop them being original. But oddly, my advice is often a little bit different to that. I feel you should know what's around you so that you can progress from that, because you need to be aware of what is modern and what is happening in society and fashion right now and in the upcoming weeks in shows, for example. As I say, the positive is that you're aware of this. And yes, if you're a great designer, because remember, lots of designers have to support their businesses with freelance work for other companies, collaborations with other companies, or even working on more than one job. So you need to widen your skills, but without losing your own identity and the way you do things and the way you treat certain fabrics. I mean, are you about color? Are you about texture? Are you about patterned fabrics? You can write a list of what you think sums you up. Perhaps start with your main 5 and try and bring those into everything you do, which in an ideal world will make your tutors think you're producing the work for the projects required, but at the same time, you are remaining true to your own long-term vision. I think it's great that you've witnessed this and realized this already.
Well, they're doing a project right now, aesthetic and identity. So that's what they have to come up with. They have to.
Hence your answer. Hence your. Well, this is the time. The only thing you might find is that it's you might know it's inside you, but how do you focus it? So when I say writing, I don't mean it has to be a long essay that you might write for Oleg, sorry to mention essays, but it might be that you need to write a summary or keep a little diary of yourself or a little notebook, because we all need to be, or if you're putting work up on a wall at home, we'd love to see inside your home, Chen, next time, you know, maybe you have a little wall somewhere where you're constantly reminding yourself of the things and images you love, so you're never too far from them. That can be one of the advantages of working from home, because these days people tend to not put their work up at college, do they? Because there is nowhere. Everything's in a suitcase, I believe. Oleg's got lots of walls. You must ask him.
Well,
looks like you've used all yours.
Well, I did, because I have, basically it's like a library. I have everything covered by books, so you know.
See, Oleg's very selfish. You can see I've got white wall. You'll have to come to me. But that would be my suggestion, because it's very easy to get taken away from your own identity. And the college isn't meaning to do that, but they want you to try all these different projects and experiments. And then you suddenly have to do a collection about yourself. And you think, well, who am I? It's a common occurrence. That's why the fact that you know this is very, very important. And you can heal this by what you now know. Now, on that note, as you all know, I'm a great lover of a fish finger, and they do take time to cook. And I'd love to be with you all night, but sadly, I turn into something ugly at midnight. That's, no. Thank you, Chen, for your reply. So that's very sweet of you. It's been lovely to see you tonight. Thank you, Oleg, of course. You must all thank Oleg, who's orchestrated all this. I've just been like a dummy.
No, don't be feeling like. Thank you everyone who stayed with us.
Thank you so much.
You know, for half an hour longer than we expected, and we hope to see you at Nigel's course. The promo code's still available, so if you want to join, you can use them, and we'll see some of you next week.
Thank you. And also, I mean, it's up to Oleg a little bit. I know some of you know Oleg, but do give us feedback, because we could always have just a Q&A thing that wouldn't necessarily be a charged for thing, just because it's nice in these times to have a sort of society of free thinking and thought, you know, even if it was just an hour and a half. But as I say, just feedback would help, because it's always good to talk about these things, isn't it, when we've got no community. Thank you for meeting you tonight, and I'm sorry I couldn't see all your faces. I hope I don't give you a sleepless night. But thank you, S. That's very sweet of you. Thank you. Thank you also, Natasha. That's very sweet of you to reply. Thank you. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Berfu. Well, Jake as well. There's so many. Thank you. It's like being on a dating site. I say, thank you, Chloe. How sweet of you. Thank you so much. It's a dating site without any of the fun. I'm sorry. Next time we'll have drinks. Thank you, Hannah. Thank you, Chen, of course. Oh, Chen's thanking you.
Oh,
Magda, Tessa, bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you. You've been lovely. Okay, take care. I'll see you soon then.
Bye, Nigel.
Bye. Thanks a lot, Oleg. Thank you.